Welcome to Voice Rising with Kara Johnstad. Enjoy weekly conversations with leading luminaries, pioneering visionaries, singers, poets, musicians, and sound healers as we explore the profound role our voice plays on the path to self-realization and global enlightenment. The internationally acclaimed singer, composer, author, healer, recording artist, voice expert, creator of Voice Your Essence, and founder of the School of Voice, Kara Johnstad uses her extraordinary spiritual gifts to empower others. Everything in this world vibrates. Everything has a frequency. A pioneer in the field of voice work and transformational songwriting. Her breakthrough methods are helping thousands of people worldwide fine-tune their body-mind-spirit system and unlock the energetic frequencies of limitless creativity, health, and abundance. Share your voice, ask your questions, join in the conversation. Receive life-changing, positive transformation and rise together to create a sound world. And here's your host, Kara Johnstad.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Voice Rising, today where we explore the transformative power of voice and dive into the depths of consciousness. Today, we have a brilliant author, Paul Levy, joining us to discuss his groundbreaking new book, Undreaming Wetiko. So get ready, make a tea, and it's going to be, I'm sure, a soul-stirring conversation as we explore the interplay between creativity, healing, and awakening of our true voices. Welcome, Paul. Welcome back to Voice Rising.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you so much.
You know, I love your work so much, and I think the reason I love it so much is that the essence is, for me, landing in the space of or arriving back to our creative genius. So I've read all the books and I love your books, but at the end of the day, it's like live our authentic selves, live our creative genius. So in these extraordinary times, Paul, we're being unmasked and confronted with our inner wounds and shadows. How do you see the interplay between the darker forces in the outer world and our own personal experiences of being wounded? And how in the world can we navigate this landscape?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. And there's definitely this, it's sort of like this reflection. The darker forces in the outer world are actually reflecting the darker forces within each one of us. Mm-hmm. And, so it's kind of like I like with my friends, I'll kind of make this joke that, oh my God, if I had a marketing department, they couldn't be doing a better job for publicizing my work than what's playing out in the world. Mm-hmm. Because, we're in the middle of a collective psychosis, and there's incredible darker forces that are acting out all over the planet. And what I'm pointing out is that that's not separate from what's happening inside of our psyche. And not only is it not separate, it can actually help us to see those analogous, those darker unconscious forces within us. And what I actually always get to in my work is at the bottom of it is our creative energy, that if we're not consciously expressing ourselves creatively, then all of a sudden that creative energy that's intrinsic to our nature, all of it gets acted out in a destructive way in our outer life. And when close to 8 billion people are unconscious of their true nature, which is to be creative, then of course we're going to dream up in our world this madness, this collective madness that's not separate from what's happening inside of our own mind.
Right. Your new book, you just shared with me, May 22nd, I believe. So it's just hot off the presses, as they say. And it's called Undreaming Wetiko. Or do you say Wetiko or Wetiko? I always say Wetiko.
I it's fine either way, so I just say it like the Wetiko is how it easily comes off of my tongue, but
Very
it's
good.
not like that's the right way and yours is the right. It just
Good.
depends on how it rolls off people's tongues.
So your new book is Undreaming Wetiko, and
Right.
I want you to talk about, you just touched on it a little bit in the first answer, but the concept of undreaming Wetiko, and then
Right.
maybe before we even talk about the concept of undreaming it, what is Wetiko for our listeners,
Right.
and why did it resonate so deeply inside of you that you decided to name your book Undreaming Wetiko?
Sure. Well, the thing is, I began having this close encounter with this Wetiko, what it symbolizes, close to 40 years ago, and I didn't have a reference point, I didn't have a name, but I was having this direct encounter with this evil force that wasn't just in a local way operating through one person, but it was clear it was enfolded within the whole non-local field. And that's to say that I saw it in my own mind. I saw other people who would become instruments for this darker force to act out. And then I saw that it was informing, these different family systems or institutionalized systems or the greater body politic of the world as if they were iterations of the same fractal. And this darker force was just coming through in different scales in this way. And, instead of just getting, whatever, just being completely, going crazy when I saw that, I was like, I was tracking it and I was creating maps around, wait a second, this is really, really important. And then I began to realize that every spiritual tradition throughout the history of our species has been pointing out this malevolent force that's actually seemingly obscuring us awakening. And I began to realize, but it's actually helping us to awaken. It has this incredible hidden gift in it, but if we don't have the recognition of its benefit, that it's actually helping us to actually, expand our consciousness, then it just assumes its programmed function of killing us. So Wetiko is this mind virus. And that's to say, when people hear the idea of a mind virus and it sounds all woo-woo and new agey, all that means is that the source of the madness, the collective madness that's acting out in the world, is to be found within the psyche. And that's a no-brainer. Where else could the source and the solution of the madness be found? And so what Wetiko does, it plugs into, in a way, we all think about this like some sort of dream, and a dream is an inkblot. This is like this shared waking dream that we're all co-creating each and every moment into manifestation. And Wetiko plugs into the part of us that projects onto the waking inkblot, so in a way where we entrance ourselves. We literally brainwash ourselves. We ultimately we're hypnotizing ourselves. There's no one else doing that. We ultimately are doing that. And then all of a sudden our creative energy, which could be expressed constructively to create this world we want to live in, gets turned against us and gets implemented in a way that's suffocating us, like that's creating a cocoon around us and that's killing us. And so I point out that this is, like in the Castaneda books, his teacher points, he doesn't have the name Wetiko, but he's pointing at it. He says, this is the topic of topics. There's nothing more important than this, because if we don't recognize what Wetiko is showing us, then we're doomed. Then we're fated to continually just commit collective suicide like we're doing right now.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating in the books is this courage to see clearly, so that, most people I know, they're either looking at what's happening on the world stages or in the political system, and they're just sitting there, I'm concerned, and this is just horrific, and this is terrible, and look at the wars, and look at the famine, and look at the hunger, and look at the climate change, and look. And they're looking, but they're not consciously moving, and they're just feeding it in that way. And the other people, or maybe even participating in the way that they're feeding it, but maybe they're even active players. You don't know. Maybe they're even sociopaths or gunmen, they're all out there, right? Or you have the spiritual, I would say the spiritual scene often. People, or maybe it's not, maybe I'm being too mean, maybe it's not the spiritual scene, but people that just say, I don't want to feed it, I don't want to give any energy to it, so I'm just not going to look. Right? I'm just going to look away. I'm going to have my green smoothie. I'm going to do my yoga. I'm going to focus only on light.
Right.
I'm only going to, I'm just, if you, whatever you, give energy to, it's going to grow. And so I'm not going to watch the news, and I'm just going to be light, be the light, right? And what was interesting about your books, and this is how I understood it, was also, even though we might find great comfort, I mean, I definitely do not watch much news, nor do I have a television. I do have a lot of good books around me, so no worries. But even though we might find comfort in saying, I'm not going to feed it, if we don't own the stories, if we don't look at our own shadows, if we don't look and confront and listen and feel, Wetiko will continue to grow, even if we're drinking our green smoothies and doing yoga.
And
that is the crux, right? That is
that's one of the major crux points, in the sense that Wetiko is like that, like turning a blind eye. That is Wetiko, because there's some truth in that. Yeah, if we focus too much on evil, on Wetiko, well, then we're feeding it. Absolutely true. But if we look away, we're in avoidance of being in relationship with that darker part of ourselves, and that looking away is Wetiko in action. That literally feeds Wetiko. So what I'm pointing out is that, on the one hand, one doesn't want to get too overly fascinated. On the other hand, one does not want to just turn a blind eye. Yeah. Those two, acts both feed Wetiko. But there's like a third way, this middle way of you see how Wetiko operates non-locally in the field. You see how it operates through your mind, through how you get triggered and you have unconscious reactions. But then being a sovereign agent, you're like, okay, I see you, but now I, as a sovereign agent, get to invest how I invest, get to choose how I invest my attention. So I can then choose to invest my attention in creating the world I want to live in. That perspective is kryptonite to Wetiko.
Exactly. So what practices or techniques might be helpful as we break free from this dreamlike grip of illusion?
Right. Well, one of the things about Wetiko, it's in the apocryphal text of the Bible, but it was written out of the Bible, of the canon, because I point out that Wetiko was on the editorial board, because Wetiko can't stand to be exposed. And in the apocryphal text, it's called the counterfeiting spirit. And in other words, it has no creativity at all on its own, but it's a master impersonator. So it'll put us on, it'll fool us, it'll offer us this fake version of ourselves. Oh, I'm limited, I'm traumatized. And if we're not awake in that moment, we'll identify with Wetiko's version of ourselves. And then it has us. Then it can manipulate and control us. Because if we're in touch with our true nature, which is to be creative, then it has no power over us. But as soon as we identify with its fake version of ourselves, then it plugs into our creativity and turns it against us. And if you think about what I'm describing, so here's Wetiko. It can't steal our soul, but it tricks us into giving it away. And then we identify with who we're not. And then we forget who we are, and then we disconnect from our creative agency. That's a recipe for total madness. That's Wetiko. And that's playing out collectively in the world, in our species, and individually to the level that each one of us is not awake.
Yeah, I even have it as the next question. Do you believe our collective neurosis is a result of suppressing our authentic voices? I mean, you could say creativity, but we know too that, I mean, I guess this show is all about voice, right? So it has to do also following our intuition, our creative impulses, the intent, our thoughts. That has all to do with creative expression. So
Yeah. Well, the whole thing is, the greatest poison in the human psyche is not consciously expressing our creativity. And the idea of Wetiko, you see, once we connect with that inner guide, the inner voice, the guiding spirit, the daimon, the muse, genius, there are all these names for it, which is an expression that it has this unbelievable sort of like miracle power. When we connect with that inner guiding spirit, then we find our vocation. We connect with who we are. We find our voice. We express ourselves creatively. But if we don't do that, if we turn away from that inner guidance, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, whatever story we have, then all of a sudden that inner guide transforms into a demon,
Right.
and in a sense, that's Wetiko.
Well, that was so interesting. When one reads the book, one really sees clearly the words. So the daimon, the Daemon, correct?
Right, the daimon, right.
Is the inner guide, or I even have it marked with pencil, the voice or the spirit, or like you said,
Right.
the muse. And then you drop one little letter, or you shift a little bit the sacred vowel, and you land a demon. I mean, it's very close. They live side by side.
Yeah. And the thing about that demon, which is so interesting, and it's important to understand Wetiko, because what I'm trying to do in my work is flood light on how Wetiko works, because as more and more people begin to see it, then it takes away Wetiko's power, with us, and we become empowered. And so the idea is this: is like we all are in trauma. Right, just being alive in this world, we're traumatized. Well, what happens in trauma? We split. A part of us disassociates, and if we don't integrate that split off part, it develops over time a seeming autonomy and independent will and life of its own. Now, in psychology speak, that's called an autonomous complex. The indigenous people call that a demon. And that's Wetiko. And it's, then it's in our mind, it's adversarial, it's stopping us from when we, connect with love, or we want to get creative. Oh, I feel stuck, I feel blocked. That's that demon. But what I'm pointing out is that encoded in that demon, in Wetiko, it's actually helping us to awaken. And, that it's showing us something. But if we don't recognize what it's showing us, then it'll just continue to destroy us.
Yeah. Paul, you do a lot of work with your authentic voice. You're a passionate writer. You're sharing also through this show your voice. I know that you do coachings and trainings and everything. In what other ways do you allow yourself to fully embrace your creative genius? Are you painting or cooking like a wild man? Or
Yeah. No, it's funny because, when I was younger, when I was in college, I was studying art and, drawing and painting and all that. And my worst subject, I couldn't write to save my life. And now here I am, a writer, and it's, it is the major way that, and then teaching and doing interviews like this, because I don't ever have any idea what I'm going to say or do in an interview or a talk. And that really is great for me, because then I'm as interested to hear what's going to come out of my mouth as the audience. So the idea being is to have like all day be just this creative expression. But for me, what the major, the thing with the writing, because, in the morning is when I write. And so I'm up, I'm brushing my teeth and I'm getting downloads about what I'm going to write about. And I've learned to distinguish between, when is it just like my, sort of whatever, just monkey mind that's neurotic that I just need to ignore, compared to when am I getting a download from on a high, and then all of a sudden I'm paying attention. Then I'm in the role almost like the employee, and I'm getting this dictate from the boss, and then I just become an instrument for whatever is being shown to me to write. And I don't even feel identified with that I'm the author. There's something is coming through me. And that's why, like, for me, that becomes a spiritual practice. So at a certain point, doing the writing and doing my meditation or my mantras and all of that, and I want to point out, because something you had asked a little while ago, those people who are spiritual people who are just, let me meditate and do that's fantastic. But if they don't recognize that their inner process is manifesting as the outer world, and I'm describing a dream, then they're just absorbed. They're self-absorbed in doing their meditation, because the point is we are being dreamed up to like enact our inner process via the medium of the outside world. And that's to say that we're being called to participate in the body politic in whatever way that means. Like for me, it's as a writer or teacher. It's different for each person. But if we don't have the courage to do that, then we're feeding the darker forces.
Yeah. Do you wake up like at 4 a.m. when the theta waves when everything else is quiet, or that's
Well, it's funny. For years I was waking up pretty early. Not quite at 4, and then
5.
I would have like 3-4 hours every morning just writing. But it's been kind of crazy. The last number of months I've gotten so busy. And I have this thing with my shoulder, this impingement syndrome, so it's been really hard to sleep. So I'm sleeping later. So now I'm finding time to write at different points of the day because I'm kind of sleeping in a little bit. But I so look forward. I mean, I was on this rhythm for years of getting up super early, and it would still be dark. And I would be writing, I'd watch the sun come up, and that was my creative time.
Yeah. I have this weird theory that writers love to write when the rest of the world is half asleep, right? Because there's a certain wavelength, which is that dream wavelength, that you have that half of the people are sleeping, and you feel that the people are sleeping around you, but you're awake, and you're kind of catching that in between theta wave space, and it's magical. And I think the muse or the spirit knows if we arrive at the same time, more or less, it kind of knows we're available. And that is one of those tricks. Do you remember the breakthrough movement or moment when you realized that in your childhood you were blocked with writing, and suddenly you gave yourself permission to just sit down and do it?
What happened, in college, there was just a sense, I was forced to write papers about stuff I wasn't overly interested in. And so it was really hard for me, and I wasn't good at it. But then, I went through this unbelievable ordeal of having this spiritual awakening that was unrecognized, and I got hospitalized and almost killed by psychiatry. And it totally destroyed my entire family. And then there was so much inside of me, this stuff that I was realizing about, oh my God, we're having a collectively shared dream. And there was all these feelings and these insights and these revelations. And that's when all of a sudden I began connecting with my voice and being able to write, because I realized, oh my God, there's so much inside of me that's thirsting to be creatively expressed. And the thing I want to point out, it's so interesting, because the greatest protection against Wetiko is to be in touch with who we are, right? To really connect with our true nature. Well, but what is our true nature? I mean, it's a cliche. People, just connect with your true nature. Well, what does that mean? Well, our true nature, by its very nature, is creative. So when we connect with our true nature, we become creative. We embody and express ourselves creatively. And the more we do that, the more we know our nature in a positive feedback loop, So then it's because of that I'm pointing out that creative expression and spiritual practice are the same. And I point out in my new book, this great philosopher talks about that he correlates being creative with the second coming. That when any of us is creative, we're participating in becoming and offering ourselves as the instrument for the second coming. But if we're not being creative and we're just passively, I'm just going to wait for the second coming, then he says we're only going to see the crucified face of Christ. We're never going to enter the resurrected body. So I can't say enough about how important it is for people to creatively express ourselves in whatever way. And it doesn't have to be something like painting or drawing. It could be the way they wash the dishes, could be creative. But just to connect that life itself is a creative venture, And in quantum physics, this is what, I wrote a whole book about quantum physics. This is what it's showing us.
The showing us that each and every one of us is participating in
I mean, just
that
really
we're all
simply.
Co-creators, or
Just really simply, what quantum physics is offering us the medicine for Wetiko, for the mind virus. Because before quantum physics, with like Newtonian physics, scientists thought the world existed objectively out there, and they were just studying it, trying to understand this world outside of themselves. Then quantum physics comes along into the world and into physicists' minds, and it points out, the act of observation influences the universe that you're observing, which is to say the act of observation is creative. And that's the rabbit hole. When you realize that, that's describing a dream. That we each one of us have this unimaginably, this vast creative agency and power, but we don't know it. And to the extent we don't know it, it gets turned against us in a destructive way. The state, the powers that be, are more than happy to pick up our creative power and use it against us. So here quantum physics comes along, and it's pointing out, hey, there's no objective universe, and not only that, you as a subject, as an ego, if there is no objective universe, what happened to you as a subject? Because to be a subject, you need an object, but if there's no objective universe, what happened to you as a subject? The point is, quantum physics is promoting itself to be a spiritual path because it's shedding light on who are we. We are creating ourselves each and every moment. We are creating our experience of ourselves, I should say, and our experience of the world. There is no one else doing that. We are doing that, and to connect with that is to begin to plug in to our creative agency and power.
Excellent. So stay tuned, Paul, as we take a short break and hear from our sponsors who do support us on this show. And don't go anywhere, because when we return, it'll be with Paul Levy to share his wisdom on reclaiming our creative power.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
With happy clients all over the world, Kara Johnstad knows that your voice is the missing link to more authenticity, abundance, creativity, and health. An internationally acclaimed voice expert, Kara's breakthrough methods have helped thousands of people successfully heal their voice wounds and extinguish the story of self-doubt and shyness forever. Join in group trainings, attend online sessions, schedule one-on-one time, and invite Kara to work with your organization and community. Get started today. Go to www.karajohnstad.com and receive a special guided meditation designed to fine-tune your inner voice and welcome you on the voice journey.
This is Kathy Beal, host of Celestial Compass, featuring astrology you can use. Celestial Compass points you to what's going on in the sky and what you can do with it down here on Earth. We also explore fun, effective, and cosmic tools for navigating this adventure we call life. Join me the first and third Monday of the month at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for Celestial Compass. It's enlightening, entertaining, and empowering.
Host your show on IOM-FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing a job
and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I hope that you had a refreshing break. If you're loving what you're hearing today on the Voice Rising show, I'd be incredibly happy if you take a moment and leave a review on your favorite streaming platform. Look for OMTimes, look for Voice Rising. Your comments and your voice inspires us to bring you more awesome content and fabulous writers, musicians, poets, luminaries, all good people that are literally creating a very good vibes out there. So let's continue now with our mind-expanding conversation with the brilliant Mr. Paul Levy, who has his new book today, Undreaming Wetiko, in his back pocket. And welcome back, Paul. Let's go deeper.
Yeah,
How's that?
I'm totally happy to go as deep as we can.
Yeah, well, let's see if I can hit your level of depth. Paul, in your journey of spiritual awakening and self-discovery, you have embraced the archetype of the wounded healer. And you share with us a lot how you found the healing encoded within your own wounds and that it has shaped you as a healer and in your own practice now when you support other people. So share with us more about the wounded healer archetype.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, at a certain point, so here I went through this incredible trauma that actually catalyzed over, a few years later, this awakening. And so it was through this woundedness, this incredible wound that I had, that, my whole process got activated. And the idea of the wounded healer, it's an archetypal idea, and it basically has to do with that, you're carrying this wound, an incurable wound. But the wound, there's a certain way, like if you identify with it, well, then you're screwed, because then you're going to dream up evidence of how wounded you are, and it's a feedback loop where it's really tragic, because then people just feel overly traumatized and abused and wounded. And it's really sad, but there's another way of holding that wound, where the wound becomes a portal to your creative gifts. And that's the idea of the wounded healer. And so for me, for years and years, I was so wounded and I was committed to, I'm going to get rid of this wound and do whatever I can. And then at a certain point, I began to realize, well, what if it never goes away? And that's when I began to embrace it, and that's when it began to manifest as this doorway to my deeper gifts. And this is related. The wounded healer is the figure of the shaman, and the shaman is the creative artist. And I point out, there's a major, I think it's the biggest chapter in the whole book, is about we're all potential shamans or wounded healers in training. That the wounded healer archetype, the shamanic archetype, is the major archetype that's activated in the collective unconscious of our species. And to the extent that we're actually, each one of us are really doing our inner work, and instead of, whatever, trying to get away from our wound, but we're actually experiencing it consciously and embracing it, then we get in touch with our gifts, with our creative gifts. And then we can actually consciously, be able to step into that figure, that archetypal role of the wounded healer, the shaman, the creative artist, and that's the figure that's going to heal our planet.
Exactly. I love words so much, and wound and wound. It seems like when we have wounds, it's really the energy is so tightly wound, around them that there's no space or spaciousness.
Right. Well, it becomes compulsive, and it becomes, it self-generates. So it becomes a self-reinforcing feedback loop, and it's like a black hole where all of our life force and creative energy gets kind of subsumed by this black hole of the wound. And that's in contradistinction to when we plug into that same energy that's feeding that self-reinforcing feedback loop of the black hole, and we are able to access it in a way where we rechannel it creatively.
And we're not afraid. We have to think like an oak tree. I think that's it. Put our roots really down in that dark soil. It's okay. We'll grow through it. It'll be fine. It'll nourish us in some way, right?
Well, this is that's the spiritual conception of, in the Kabbalah, they talk about the descent on behalf of the ascent. The idea is that it's by going down, that's the shamanic calling. I wrote that article right before the lockdown started, and I said, we as a species are going through a shamanic death rebirth experience. Right. Collectively and individually, where we're descending into the underworld of the unconscious. And and this is like when you read the collected works, Jung himself says the biggest problem of our time is we don't know what's happening in our world. And he says what's happening is that the darkness of the soul is revealing itself, and the light is actually not only shedding light on the darkness, it's revealing itself through the darkness, okay? That's why we're all being pushed into this descent, into the darkness of the unconscious. The point is not to get stuck there, but the idea of the wounded healer shaman is at a certain point they come back into the world and they're bearing gifts as a result of their ordeal.
Yeah. We know that the wounds can become our greatest strengths, but Paul, what do we do in this world that seems so, where it seems at times so unsafe or not safe, where we share our voice and somebody counters it with their own opinion, where we just, we draw a beautiful picture and somebody says that looks like dog poop or whatever.
Yeah.
What do you suggest for people to be, it's great to say, your wound is your greatest strength, or go into that creativity, but we can also go crazy there. So which way do we have to take the courage to look at our shadows and to still be able to trust that we have a match somewhere, that we can navigate somewhere? I mean, this is why I've been meditating for the years. That's what I always tell people. I've been meditating for years, because I'm like, every day you sit down and then you have a certain, I don't know, it's not like you go to a workshop and suddenly all this energy is activated in your body, which can make you crazy. You do step by step, right? And then you can maybe see around the corner, right?
Yeah, well, it's so interesting, because like in this world we live in right now, it's never been like this before, where, when we step into our voice, it's like this dangerous situation, because, it could offend somebody, they get triggered, you get censored, you get deplatformed and all of that.
Right.
And I point out that that's a sign of Wetiko. When Wetiko is in the room, that's what happens. And then what that's an expression of, that's an externalization of, say we have, because we've all gone through trauma or abuse, right, where it's not safe to be ourselves. Well, what then happens is that dynamic becomes internalized in our psyche, and it gets pushed down into the unconscious, and we become our own control system, and we preemptively shut ourselves down without even knowing it. And that's when we become, then we've gotten infected, really, by Wetiko and all that. And that's why the incredible importance of finding your voice and trying to express it in a way. It's tricky, because, like I'm saying, the world right now is a very unfriendly place if you're expressing a viewpoint that's contrary to the agreed upon narrative that the powers that be want us to speak. And that needs to be integrated into, okay, how do we navigate that? And that's a very open-ended question.
Yeah, I think it's very tricky. And I know for me, as a songwriter and a poet and somebody who works a lot with voice, it's also very different when you put words to your truth, or when you put that and wrap it into melodies, right? Because a painter might be able to paint many, many layers of what they're feeling. They're very creative, but they won't trigger as much, because people will just see the symbolism normally a little bit differently than if you name something, if you have the courage to name what you are feeling in that moment. And that is why it is a little bit tricky. When we come into our voice, it's easy to say, express yourself honestly and truthfully, and yet it's not always welcome. And how do we discern where we're able to do it? And also, how do we have the courage, if we are censored, to realize, but this was a path we needed to take, and to take that responsibility.
Yeah, well, it's very much like, I've actually expressed that I really am of the opinion that, we all have our abuse issues or wounds or traumas. That's part of the gig of being human. But, I really feel that when you really essentialize what is the fundamental core abuse, what it is that at a certain point in our lives, typically when we're kids, when we step into our light and be ourselves and creatively express ourselves, it's not safe, that it's dangerous. We get criticized. We get the person withdraws their love. They get angry. And then that gets internalized. Now, the thing with me, like my whole abuse was with reference to when I was in college and I was realizing, oh, wow, I'm a creative artist. I'm not. I was studying economics and math, and I realized, no, that was my father's version of who I was. I'm realizing I'm a creative artist. And so my father got dreamed up to try to obliterate that creative version of me because he wanted me to be his version. Well, the point that I'm making is that, if it's the true creative spirit, it's not going to be kept down for long. Okay? So it found another way. Here I was starting to paint and draw, and now I found a different medium with writing and speaking. And so that's an incredibly important point, that it's not just a personal thing. Oh, yeah, my creative process gets squashed and there's nothing I can do. No, it's a transpersonal archetypal energy that interfaces with something sacred. And when it gets, really repressed, or like by outer forces, suppressing it, it will find a way and to be in service to that, because that will heal you. It's exactly what Christ was saying in the apocryphal text. If you bring forth what's within you, it'll save you. If you don't bring it forth, it'll destroy you.
Yeah, exactly. Paul, how can music and poetry serve as a gateway to access our innermost truth?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it doesn't, it's not important what medium, whether it's, you should write or you should paint or draw. No, anything that where you're connected with your soul, with your heart, and with that good heart, that, and that you're just being an instrument for something that's greater than yourself to come through. And then whatever the medium is becomes the artifact or the testament for the experience that you were having as you were creating, that potentially can get transmitted into the listener, And so, and the thing about this, that's kind of one of the things I think about with the work I do, is that people again and again tell me when they read my stuff, they listen to me talk, they get really psychoactivated. Their psyche gets activated. They start dreaming and imagining, and that can go viral. It's like contagious. You see, so what I'm trying to point out, just like the mind virus, just like COVID can be contagious, or the mind virus can be contagious and create collective psychosis, so can when we have realization of our creative nature, and when we embody that and express that, that can turn people on and transmit to other people as if it's a contagion, and that can go viral and spread via the form of an awakening.
That's the pandemic we're actually waiting for, right?
Yeah, but not just waiting, but what we're actually creating. That's the point, that we actually are just like, so quantum physics says, this isn't a universe where we're just observing passively. No, it's a participatory universe, that in order to get the benefits of like the quantum, it involves us participating in the revelatory aspect. We have to recognize the revelation. That's Wetiko. Wetiko is it's a revelation. It's the greatest catalyst for the evolution of our species. But if we don't recognize it, then it just kills us. And, the whole title of the book, like the idea of, dreaming and undreaming Wetiko. Wetiko is a dreamed up phenomena. We are 8 billion of us. We're co-dreaming it together. And what that means is that when we see that, we can undream it, okay? So just one final thing about this. People ask me, well, how come, it's clear we're committing collective suicide. And people say to me, well, how come we're doing that? And I can answer that very succinctly. We are committing collective suicide because we do not know how not to do it. And the way and the act of doing it. So here we are, we're enacting collective suicide. That's the way we're teaching ourselves how to not do it. Because if we knew how not to do it, we wouldn't be doing it. The point is, encoded in the pathogen is the vaccine, is the medicine. Encoded in the mind virus, it's helping us to wake up. It's a quantum phenomena. There's a superposition of states of the greatest evil and the greatest awakening, and they're both there in potential. And how the mind virus will manifest depends on if we recognize what it's revealing to us. I say this again and again in my work.
I was listening to the word pathogen. I thought encoded in the pathogen is the path of what, Genesis?
It's the path of healing. It's the path of awakening.
Path of healing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a little bit. I have to think about that 100th monkey thing because I really have always said to people that I think in my lifetime, I'm now 58, we're going to see world peace. And they're always like, no, Kara, this is crazy. And I'm like, no, it's not crazy, because I really deeply believe that if enough people decide to undream it, and dream it, right? I mean, if enough people say, make the choice and just say, I've decided now I'm going to make the choice. I'm just going to try it a different way, because obviously what we've been trying is obviously not working. That suddenly, and that we know that with quantum physics, that suddenly there can be a huge spark of inspiration, and something absolutely crazy can be created. I mean, if I look at my life, I started out with we didn't have any mini disc players, we didn't have any DAT players, we didn't have any video players. I mean, we had cassettes, and now look, we're streaming music. I mean, nobody would have thought that. And now we have artificial intelligence, which is taking over the world. Nobody would have thought that. Even 2 years ago, nobody would have thought it, right? I mean, the people that were developing it, maybe, but nobody else. And it can happen really fast, but we have to set the intent and act, like you said. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, just to bring in quantum physics again, because it's really so inspiring. What quantum physics has discovered, they talk, they're trying to find what is the real, like, the fundamental building block of this physical universe. And they would go down in scale, to the micro scale, and then they didn't find anything physical. They found mind. But the point is, they describe it as these elementary particles. And these elementary quantum particles, they exist in a state of every and any potentiality they ever could possibly ever exist in, up until the moment that we observe them. And then we observe the quantum entity, and that moment of observation, all of a sudden that quantum entity will actualize into a specific, particular form, and all of the other possibilities, they just vaporize into parallel worlds. The point is, and this isn't me, these are the most brilliant minds of quantum physics. They say, even if one of those possibilities is highly ridiculously, and this is a quote, unlikely, this means that it could be the very universe that happens in this very moment, that incredibly highly improbable potentiality. And the point is that the idea that humanity can wake up in time to avert the myriad catastrophes that we are actually unconsciously creating, that we could wake up and actually, to avert the catastrophe and to dream a universe that's in alignment with who we're discovering ourselves to be, which is that we're not separate, which is that we're interconnected and interdependent, that's a possibility, that's a very real possibility, and that could be the very next moment. And if we're not seeing that and investing our attention in that, then what in the world are we thinking? We're then unwittingly feeding the darker forces. It's very much like we've had a recurring dream again and again and again. And we've once again gotten to this point that we're at exactly right now in history, where we have these powers to destroy ourselves as a species. And we've done it again and again and again. We've destroyed ourselves. And then being a dream, in dream time, we just get back to the same place billions of years later. Here we are again. And what I'm pointing out is, what if this is the recurring dream where we don't destroy ourselves, where we actually wake up to what we're tapping into and we channel it into something constructive instead of destructive?
Exactly. So if you had the opposite to undreaming Wetiko, would be dreaming blank. Fill in the blank.
Yeah,
what can we dream?
Yeah, I've coined this phrase we would dream an art happening called global awakening. Okay?
Nice.
And I like that phrase because art happening, it connotes that we all are participating. We're all co-conjuring up together this art happening, and the art happening is one where all of us awaken, because in the whole idea of when somebody awakens in Buddhism, and they're about to enter nirvana, and they look back and they see all their suffering, their fellow suffering, their brothers and sisters, and they realize, I'm not going to enter into nirvana until I bring everybody else there first, because we're all interconnected. There's no separate self.
Yeah.
The separate self is Wetiko. So the idea that, we don't really any of us get enlightened until we all do, because we're not separate.
Yeah, you would think that the people would get this a little bit quicker. I know that for those in the States with the Canadian fires, and suddenly you're sitting in New York City and you also have smoke in the air, they would figure out that we're connected with our thoughts and with the air that we breathe, and with iconic moments that have shaped the world. And yet people continue to act as if they're the only one on the planet at times.
Well, it's like a spell. It's like we are under
like
a spell. Yeah, both collectively and individually. And that's what happened to me, where I, at a certain point, popped out of the spell, and I'm still a work in progress. I'm still it's not like, oh, I'm like any enlightened person. No, but I've had a certain understanding, and it's really like being in a fairy tale, and there's been a spell that's befallen our land. And I really invoke people who hear this to be like, okay, if you were the author of this fairy tale, how would you imagine that spell would be broken? And that's, in a sense, what my work is about, and I think what a lot of our work is about.
Paul, if you could, I know you named your book Undreaming Wetiko, but if you could distill, now this is always what I find interesting. As a singer-songwriter, people think it's so hard to write books, which it is, but it's also very hard to distill it into, 3 or 4 verses. So if you could distill your life's message into a song and give it a title, what do you think you'd come up with?
Wow, that's interesting. Well, as you began to ask that question, there were a couple of thought forms that fell in my mind. One was part of the verse of that song is the importance of having compassion. Compassion is the Wetiko dissolver par excellence. The other thought form that fell in my mind, one of the greatest Buddhist sages is named Shantideva. He wrote The Way of the Bodhisattva. When I asked one of my lamas, one of my teachers, what was the one book, if he was on a desert island, that he would want with him, he said, oh, The Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. Now, Shantideva has a verse in that book. He talks about, he goes, there's some sort of darker force that's putting me under a spell, that's stopping me from connecting with my nature. What is the nature of this darker force? And that's what I'm pointing at, and that would be a verse in the song, or maybe even the title, because the idea is, people who we're into light and love and awakening, but you can't possibly have the actualization of that unless what is contrary to that? What is stopping you? And all my whole work is trying to flood light, because in Islam, in the Holy Quran, the last surah, this is the holy book. This is the voice of God, according to Islamic people. They talk about Wetiko. And what it says, it calls it the slinking prompter. That's the name for Wetiko in the Quran, right? And the prompter, it prompts us to react unconsciously. It prompts us to enact evil. But it's slinking because when you see it, it's feeble. It has no power at all when you see it, and it just slinks away. That's why I'm continually trying to point that, look, here's this thing that if we don't see it, it has power over us, and it's destroying us, and it's inspiring us to self-destruct. But once you turn and shed light on it, it slinks away. It's completely powerless. All of this would be part of the verse of the song.
Yeah, I hear a Cohen-esque. I think Leonard Cohen says he wrote 400 verses to his Hallelujah, which nobody knows that he wrote so many, but somewhere they're there. And I think that there are enough verses with Wetiko, enough facets of this amazing journey to create a very epic album at that. The time has run so fast, Paul. I want to share with everybody out there, Paul's awakeninthedream.com, I believe, is your homepage, correct? And you're giving sessions, and of course you're giving tons of interview in the moment. So I don't know what your timing is like, but I do believe you also have groups sometimes, like study groups that meet to talk about these things.
Yeah. I have two 2 groups every week that are local in Portland, and then 2 international groups that are on Zoom, and then I have another group once a month. So at the minimum, I have 4 groups a week, and then like all these clients, and then interviews, and then writing new books. And yeah, because I feel like, okay, I found my mission, my vocation. This is completely what I'm here to do. Yes. And it's healing me by creating this work, and it's helping people. Every day I get emails. People are like, "Oh my God, I'm so grateful I found your stuff. It's helped me to understand what I'm going through."
Exactly.
Yeah,
Beautiful. And as we close the interview, for everybody out there too, next week we have Maya Toll, who's best-selling author, speaker, and a deep believer also in connecting with the mystical worlds and transforming lives. So that's going to be exciting. And again, Paul, I mean, just exactly keep on living your message. You are a messenger. I've been very grateful to actually be inspired to keep on that track, keep on keeping on with connecting with the creative spark, the creative genius that lives within us all, right? To continue, all of us, the work. I mean, I'm an artist, but I'm also a coach and a teacher, and it's just very empowering when we can support each other out there to make this world a very groovy place to live and co-create it into a reality that we all want to be in.
Yeah. No, that's the idea. In Buddhism, they talk about the profound importance of having sangha, of community, because being an artist, it's an individual path, but there's merit to connecting with community.
Exactly. Okay. Blessings to you. We wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.